Hello, it's Kim Krause-Schwam. We are in the leads module, and now I'm going to take apart one of my successful leads from a long-running control promo that I wrote, and I'm going to break it all down and show you all the different parts. So let's get going with anatomy of a successful lead. Yes, we are in biology class now. We're going to focus, speaking of biology, we're going to get a little sciencey. We're going to be focusing on my sinus miracle. It is a supplement that helps people who have allergies, asthma, just sinusitis, chronic sinus problems. Some that just flare up certain times of year, or in other cases, they're just kind of dealing with it all the time. So originally wrote this as a sales page as part of a new launch for this product back in 2016. It's a powerful formula that has a few ingredients that are not well known, and I use that to my advantage. In addition, it had several gold standard human studies with good results to use for proof. And by gold standard human clinical studies, I mean, they're with humans, they're placebo controlled, they're, all the other factors that go into a high quality study. I had a lot of good things to work with. This is also one of the promotions that I break down in my $1 Million Controls Masterclass and get really deep into all the nitty gritty. It targets a problem where other solutions don't work well or have side effects, right? So this is a market that, there's not a lot of good options, So a supplement, and this was when supplements for sinuses were pretty unusual. They're still somewhat unusual. It's very much a niche market. And also it helps that the prospect is very problem aware, because again, this is one of these things that if you're suffering from this kind of problem, you're feeling it. You're dealing with it. It's a constant pain point. It's maybe even keeping you up at night, so you're very aware of this problem, and the urgency to solve it is pretty high. All right, so let's look at the sales page. We're going to be, again, I'm breaking apart the lead here, but let's look at what you see when you first land here after typically clicking a link in an email. So everything you see above the fold is mainly the headline and the opening parts of the lead. This is what, let's just start reading it. Tired of simply being a sinus survivor? Now you can be a sinus thriver in just minutes. New fast-acting breakthrough attacks the underlying cause of your suffering in just minutes and helps nearly 9 in 10 people free themselves from sinus misery and breathe more clearly and freely in 3 weeks or less. Okay, the lead. It gets right into it. Stubborn, and I think that I used to have a salutation here. I'm not sure what happened to it. I have to take a closer look. Or maybe ask around, because I know they're still running this. Stubborn sinus problems don't just affect your nose and respiratory system. They can ruin your life. Now, let's first ask ourselves, what kind of lead is this, right? Let me just finish reading. I just gave away the answer. They can leave you feeling constantly exhausted, like you've been run over by a truck. They can leave you feeling knocked down by every bug that's going around, to the point you can barely get out of bed. At night you may be so stuffed up you can barely breathe, making it impossible to sleep through the night. So you feel like the Walking Dead the next day, unable to muster up the energy to get things done, or dealing with so much brain fog you can barely think straight. And P.S., I don't suffer from sinus problems. I mean, I've maybe had 1 or 2 sinus infections in my whole life. So I had to really do my research. I had to talk to people. I surveyed people. I hung out in forums, and I just totally took notes, and lots of notes about the prospect's own language. How did they describe how it felt? How did they describe what they were dealing with, right? And I'm using a lot of their own language here. So the kind of lead it is, it's a problem solution lead. And if we'll read through it, you'll see I do start to hint at the solution. I'm already hinting at it, obviously, in the deck copy of the headline. Right? But it calls out the target prospect and paints a picture of their dream in the headline, freedom from sinus misery and breathe more clearly and freely, offers a dramatic result and a powerful claim of effectiveness. And as you can see, it hints at a solution. So as part of the actual lead part of that, the problem part of the problem solution, it opens with a head nodder sentence that also calls out the target prospect so that they say, this is for me, right? Stubborn sinus problems don't just affect your nose and respiratory system, they can ruin your life. Yep, I agree with that. Yep, this is for me. And then the paragraphs that follow agitate the prospect's pain points, right? And we don't have to reread that, but yeah, they can leave you feeling knocked down, like you've been run over a truck. I took that right out of a forum, right? And then meanwhile, the constant post-nasal drip leaves bad tasting, icky mucus gunk. It can even cause stomach upset. And that agonizing sinus pressure, it can put you out of commission for hours, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm casting a wider net, because this is one of those problems, just like digestion, right? Where I think I may have shown you, or you'll see it at some point, the integrative digestive formula promotion that I wrote. That's also been a very long-running control. It's been like 11 years running. But what I did is I cast a wide net, because it's not just acid reflux that somebody has, or constipation. They might, they don't necessarily have all those problems, but just one of those, right? So same thing here. Maybe the symptom that's really driving them crazy is the post-nasal drip, or maybe it's just having a stuffy nose, or it's the sinus pressure that's giving them a headache. So after agitating the problem, we shift to the solution. Okay, you might think you've tried everything to end your sinus misery, but nothing works. Until now, at best, you've been able to get temporary relief. You've focused on just getting by. You've been a sinus survivor. I think some of this came out of just their own language as well. It even became like my angle in my headline. But all of that is about to change. From this day forward, I'm going to show you how to be a sinus thriver. So now I'm promising that transformation, right? And painting the picture of that, doing the future pacing. Picture yourself no longer having to live in fear of that next crippling sinus attack. No longer constantly doping yourself up with conventional therapies that leave you drowsy-headed. That is a reasonably safe way of avoiding any FDA problems, right? Because you cannot name drugs. You shouldn't even use the word drugs if you're writing supplement copy. And you certainly can't name any drug names. So this is a way of talking about those other types of remedies. And so yeah, and most important of all, no longer dealing with the agonizing pressure or facial discomfort, etc., and feeling downright rotten all the time. So I'm showing them what's possible once they have access to a better way of solving their problem. And again, I'm writing this all in their own language, which I got from all my research. Okay. Now at this point, we introduce who's speaking. We've gotten pretty far into the promotion, so it is time to figure out who is this guy, who is speaking, and why should I listen to them. So here we go with a crosshead that says, "Who am I to challenge these widely used sinus treatments? My name is Lee Euler. I've been writing about and researching natural health options for more than 20 years. I also used to suffer from severe sinus problems for most of my life." So now we're bringing in the spokesperson's own story, right? So you should, after you introduce them by name, there should be some kind of credibility, without sounding too braggy since it's written in the first person. And then here he is. He's, it's building trust that he's also, hey, I'm like you. I've suffered with this myself. But it is kind of in the past tense, right? It is in the past tense. So it helps to set up his discovery story of the solution. All right, so now we get into the discovery story, and it leads to showing a dramatic transformation. I'm finally working with another health researcher. I was able to identify a handful of well-researched nutrients, etc., right? Decided to test it on myself. And then I saw something remarkable. I went from sinus survivor to sinus thriver, and now you can too. Okay, so that can be a really powerful way to add some authority and trust to your promotion. And then the words used to describe the transformation further agitate the prospect's yearning for the same result and keeps them reading. Notice there's still no selling even at this point. As I continued to take it, the differences were even more amazing. These nutrients seemed to fend off any discomfort, etc., etc. Now I'm living life to the fullest each day as a sinus, thriver. This is the only thing I need to take for sinuses, and I rarely have to reach for the neti pot. For some of these people, the neti pot is their nemesis. So the idea that you can have this transformation, he did it for himself, and now you can too. And now, this is the perfect time to introduce the product, right? So we've really built up to this. So since we've had such a great build up to this product, we're going to have to follow up with some of the strongest proof that we have. And so in this case, I'm following with a summarized yet dramatized breakdown of one of the best studies. It shows the immediate, short-term, and longer-term benefits, building up to the biggest claim of a permanent solution after just 3 weeks. So be sure to read through all this, right? It's all due to taking this powerful combination of nutrients, etc. And now I've put them into a breakthrough supplement so others like you can become the sinus thrivers too. And then we got this great transition, how a breakthrough discovery can give you a new lease on life. And then no matter how long you've been suffering or what the cause or how bad your sinus issues are now, the nutrients in my new fast-acting solution called My Sinus Miracle can work wonders. And then I get into it, right? Just take a look at these stunning results in just hours. And I think I'm combining, this might have been findings from a couple different studies. And I do, if you notice, I have footnotes throughout. I haven't mentioned that. I do mention that in my research-based product. But obviously you want to footnote in your draft whenever you're referencing a study, because your client will want to see that later, and you may want to go back and re-review the study and make sure you're presenting it in the strongest way possible. But when you do an online sales page, you typically need to include those references at the end. Facebook requires it, I think Google. So, you want to have those referenced. And again, it also just helps reinforce that this is actual real proof for those very skeptical people that you're writing to. All right. So the essential elements of lead copy in order of appearance for My Sinus Miracle promo example. A strong opening sentence that calls out the target prospect, gets them nodding their head, and shows empathy. A smooth transition from the main headline to the opening paragraphs. A continuation of the big idea that you can stop suffering and start thriving. It is possible. A single desired benefit or promise. Get fast relief and end sinus problems for good. This is their ultimate dream, right? A core emotion that resonates, in this case, pain and hope. A story that stimulates curiosity or overcomes skepticism, the spokesperson's own story of past struggles and how the solution provided the desired transformation. All right, so we're going to end with a little exercise for you. Collect different promos in your niche that you write for or that you want to write for, and handwrite the lead sections and identify each essential element. Take the opening sentence and try rewriting it using different approaches. For example, instead of opening with a head nod statement like this promo example, open with an imaginary scenario. For example, imagine no longer dealing with sinus problems. Imagine blah, blah, blah. And then lead with the picture and contrast with that with where they are now. You could have the power of 3. You could have 3 different things. No longer waking up with a stuffy head. No longer feeling so groggy you have to drag yourself through the day. Chances are that's not the case for you if you suffer from sinus issues now. Instead, you may be waking up feeling exhausted, et cetera, right? So you can kind of flip it. Think about alternate lead approaches that could be just as powerful, if not more so. Like, what if we led with Lee's own story of his struggles and his ultimate transformation? It could be a story lead. What happens with the promos that you're studying or have already written or are working on now when you take out the first 5 paragraphs? That's one of my little favorite tips. Does it actually make the lead stronger? Now, it may not always do that, but check it out. Maybe it's the first 4, maybe it's the first 6, maybe 0. And is there a buried lead or angle even further down in your promotion that could be used instead? Or for, a test, once you have the control. You're going to be constantly coming up with new angles and headlines and potentially leads to keep that control alive. Maybe not constantly, it may not even be that often, or it might be more often depending on how the promotion's doing. But yeah, you might have something just buried in that, further down that could be a really great headline and lead, to test. All right, you're now ready to write killer leads. Use the different lead options, opening sentence types, and essential lead copy elements as your personal Swiss Army knife for making your lead as strong and compelling as possible. And as you write your promo, think of alternate ways in with your lead, like these are different ways in to get the prospect to read, and also likely will impact your headline that you can use for testing, either when your promo first runs or later when it starts to fatigue. Again, sometimes you might get the option, this is more true in the direct mail world, you're going up against a strong control, and maybe your client gives you 2 or 3 slots to test, right? Usually you just get one test panel, so you got to just give that one your very best shot that you think has the best chances of working. Again, nobody has a crystal ball. But if you can get a second or third slot, or split to do another test, probably want to lead with another headline. Test those different headline angles and lead angles and see which one gives you the biggest boost. And then maybe you'll have a better shot at getting that control. And of course, this is something to do when your promo begins to fatigue later, to keep it running and make it stronger. So I'll see you in the next video where I'm going to do some critiques on actual copy, lead copy submitted to me by my copywriting mentees. So I'll see you there. Check it out.